I'd read quite a lot of his post-Cold War stuff, but not this. I think it was one of those things that I almost felt I knew because it was so present. You don't have to have read it to know who Smiley is. And the series was very much a dominating feature of those few years toward the end of the 70s. To the extent where I can't remember if I actually sat down and watched the whole thing or not. But I was very, very familiar with it. I read the novel 3 or 4 times in the run-up to doing this. Yes, and I think it should always be that way. I think it's very difficult to make a decent adaptation of an extremely good book. I think people have found this over and over again. And I think it has to, in order to reinterpret it honestly and with a genuine freedom, and I think all creative processes depend on a certain amount of freedom, you have to make it your own, and you have to, at some point, almost be unfaithful to your source. I think you start off in love with it and inspired by it, and I think at some point you have to, become free of the parent. I think somebody quoted Visconti when I was at Venice, the Venice Film Festival last week, making a similar observation that you actually have to betray the original. I think he was talking about The Leopard. And having done that, hopefully you have the best chance of actually being true to it. It's a paradox. Brilliant. I was struck by the courage and the sheer level of imagination and sophistication that it took to distill it to that extent. It made use of silence. It would be very easy to panic with something which is very rich in language and try to cram as much of that in as possible. It's also full of information, and there are an awful lot of clues which are delivered through dialogue. And they are made use of, but they're made use of very, very sparingly. And I think that the part of the language of this adaptation is silence. And I think that it's all the more powerful for that. And I think it's very, very much to the credit of Peter Strahan and Bridget O'Connor that they took that approach and owned it to that extent, and didn't give over to a sense of haste and urgency. It lives. It has its own pace, and I think it exudes confidence in that way. I think Hayden's a great character. He's layer upon layer. In fact, I think that Smiley's observation of him as the Russian doll, what are they called? The doll inside the doll, which they used as the logo for the television series. And Hayden is very much the person about whom that is observed. Everybody liked working with Thomas. He's got a great personal charm and personal appeal. Great directors don't have to have that, but it really helps if they do. And the atmosphere was thoughtful, concentrated, but it felt safe and conducive to collaboration and being able to make contributions and take risks. He's very clear. His English is extremely good. It's better than a lot of English people. And he was able to really unlock things, I think, just by his presence. He doesn't hang around. He doesn't do setups after setup after setup. He's not a neurotic person. I think a lot of that does come from insecurity, and he doesn't seem to have any. And he also doesn't do take after take, so there's always a sense that this is the moment, you're on. It's not going to be another take in an hour's time or another setup. It's now. And so I think that really did focus things. These are all people that I've admired for years. I think we were all somewhat tongue-tied by the presence of John Hurt, who's been somewhat, I think, one of everybody's, among their favourite actors, I think, in my case, since I was a boy. And Gary and I basically started out more or less at the same time, but his career and his work was very different from mine, and he established himself very differently, and I've always had immense admiration for him. I think he's quite simply one of the best actors in the world. But you could go through the whole list. I'm going to leave someone out if I actually do start to name them, but I mean, it was dazzling to look around the room and see who was there. And it makes you look better, I think. You know, it can be intimidating to be with a bunch of brilliant people. But when it comes to acting, I think it doesn't show you up. It actually makes you, A, raise your game, and B, just make you look better.
I think it's a great book, and I saw the series. I'm old enough to remember the series the first time around, where you would arrange your social calendar around before VCRs and TiVo and all of that, and you would put aside whatever you were doing for that hour a week. So yeah, very familiar with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Well, many things. Obviously a great role. Thomas ALFREDSON. I very much like to let the right one in. Great. I mean, he's pulled a rabbit out of the hat here, I think. I mean, it's such a bold second movie, and it's his second language, so I think he's really done something very special with this. But that was the sort of main draw. I wanted to work with Thomas, and then of course this cast is phenomenal. There's a cruelty to Smiley, which it's very much there in the book, and that's a characteristic, I think, that Guinness didn't play, or didn't choose to play. His Smiley is a little more huggable than mine, and you approach something like this, I think, as an actor would a classical role. I mean, Guinness's portrayal was very it's very famous, and it was very much beloved. But like an actor, an actor might play Hamlet. I think that there's the sort of the ghost of, Gielgud and Burton and all those people that have played it before. But you kind of have to push that aside and try and make something like this your own. And hopefully I've done that. Well, the book exists, and it's its thing. It is not a remake of the television series, and that stands on its own. I mean, it is the book, but but seen through the eyes of Peter and Bridget and Tomas. So I think that was very much the brief going in. That Le Carré said, look, you know, don't make the book, don't do a remake, but it very much stands on its own as an original piece. I'd worked with Kieran Hines in the early '80s at the Glasgow Citizens Theatre, so I knew Kieran from way back. We're all fans of each other's work, and I had admired John Hurt for many years, and was a big fan of John. So much so I was very nervous on the first day to meet him. Like a fan, you know, and I forged a very good friendship with Benedict through this experience, and Colin, and hopefully Colin and I will do. We're planning to do something in the future. It was a real joy going into work. It's a great character to play, and you get to. Of course, I gotta go with all of them. I have scenes with all the cast, which is rare. You don't often have that, and it's great to work with sort of new talent, young talent like Mr. Hardy, who's it seems to me is on the he's on the rocket ship. I'm very proud of it. Yeah, I think it's I think it's quite an achievement, and it's easier to sit here and do this when you think you've got a good one. I like the scene where Gwillem, played by Cumberbatch, sort of gets his addressing down in the conference room from Alaline. I think it's a very powerful scene. Well, I think cinematically, it's a thing of beauty. I think Hoyter, the cinematographer's done an amazing job. The pace is. Someone said that it was like watching snowfall. The pace, which I think is a very sort of poetic way of putting it. Audacious and refreshing. I mean, you don't think of that when you're shooting, but sometimes the press like to see what you've got downstairs, don't they? If you know what I mean. You know, they can give it to you sometimes, and but they seem to have embraced this, and it's got real momentum. I think hopefully it'll do well.
Thomas Alfredson attracted me to the role of Ricky Tower because I hadn't read the book, which is terrible, isn't it, really, when you think about it? And I hadn't seen the TV show, despite my father having given it to me a couple of years before he even met Thomas. So you should watch this, and because he's a huge fan of Johnny Carré. And then Lindy called me. Lindy became my agent and said, Thomas Alfredson wants to meet you. He directed Let the Right One In, which is brilliant. And for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and was wondering if you'd have lunch with him. So I was like, absolutely. And I went to meet him, and we had a long chat. And I decided that, he asked me if it was something I wanted to come in, get involved with, and I was completely sold on him. And so I went away and read the story, and this is, it's a fantastic espionage story and a classic, obviously a classic piece of literature. And that's it, really. It was very good. It was very well written. It was a very strong script, and that's rare. It was very clear. It had character. It was funny at times. It was thrilling. The suspense was evident on the page. It was very clear. It moved forward at a healthy pace, and it tied up tightly. It was solid. Which then it was no surprise when all of a sudden these high priests of British film suddenly start to attach themselves to the film. It wasn't a surprise suddenly that Thomas has managed to get Toby Jones, John Hurt, Colin Firth, Stevie Graham, Benedict Cumberbatch still start appearing, and of course Gary Oldman being the centre of that. So and that's testament obviously to great producing, great writing, and attaching a great director. First time round, before the reshoots, because my wig was not very good the first time round, that they decided to burn the wig and my Australian accent, because that wasn't very good either. The first time round wasn't very good because I spent all my time watching him, because I'm such a big Gary Oldman fan that I was a bit starstruck. So I was very grateful to get to come back and do it again, because the second time round I was like, right, I've got to do the job properly now, because I let him down the first time. There was such a great chemistry on set and alchemy that the whole experience was solid, and it has been even through the press and through. I'm looking forward to the premiere tonight, and through Venice. It's just been a very tight ship with something which is quality and clearly blue chip. So I can't say that there was one thing that stood out that wasn't exceptional about working on Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It was actually it was almost effortless. So clearly, and I've been on enough jobs to know that you see panic. Or you see things going wrong. I didn't see anything go wrong or anyone lose a beat at all on it.
I'm not particularly a fan of spy fiction, really, and I suppose we didn't think of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy as a spy novel, bizarrely. We just responded to it as a novel, as a work of literature.
I think I'm not in particular a spy novel reader. I think this book had other qualities that made me interested in the project, like the relations between the characters. I think we have now like quite a long distance between now and the Cold War, and it feels like the the novel was written in the Cold War. The TV series was made in the end of it, and now we have sort of a historical distance to it. So it's three quite different interpretations of the same material.
Mm. I felt quite nervous approaching the novel, and Bridget did as well, because it's such an iconic novel and Smiley's such an iconic character, especially in the UK. But we met Thomas, who seemed very calm and seemed to know what he was doing, although he later confessed he didn't. And knowing that John le Carré was on board and was supporting the project sort of calmed our nerves.
Well, you get on your toes, and it was like the first time we gathered these fine actors in the conference room. It was a very concentrated feeling on the set. But after a while, you forget about that. You need to get on with the work. But it was a luxury, of course, to have that amount of talent in the same space and working together for the same goal. A pleasure. He has a very complicated task, that is to make a portrait of a man who doesn't almost speak or do anything or say anything. So Gary was extremely concentrated, as I remember it, and he was in character 24/7 during that whole period, and he sort of became Smiley, and but it was a joy to see, and you could also see that he has made, I don't know how many films he's made, but 30, 40 films or something, that he is so educated in the craft, and he was a joy to work with. Well, you sort of fine-tune your eyes and your mind when you're doing a film. It's like when you're expecting a baby, you see babies all over the place. So if you're doing a film about the spy world in the 70s, you start looking at the world with a certain view, and you collect things in your head, and you start imagining this secret world. And so it could be anything. It could be an interview on TV or an old magazine or whatever.
John was incredibly supportive from the beginning. We were quite nervous meeting him, but he was kind of the way you hoped someone like that was going to be. He was, razor sharp and intelligent, but also kind, and he was very warm with us and very generous. And he basically said, if you can use me in any way, ring me up, but I won't intrude. You're going to do it your own way. So we took him up on that and bombarded him with questions throughout the whole process and checked things out with him. And I'm sure he must have had reservations at the beginning. It's a book that's dear to his heart. But I think he likes it. I hope he likes it. He says he likes it, and he
says, yeah, and he's been like, he understands that the film is not for him. It's for the audience, and but he's been very supportive and praising. You see him for a few seconds at the Christmas party. If you watch, there are three pieces of the Christmas party, and I think this is the second one, the one with the Lenin Santa. You could see John le Carré singing the Russian anthem.
I like Peter Gwilym going into the circus to steal the file. I liked I like this working on a kind of thriller scene that has so little to work with in a way. And there's only kind of a phone call and a man in a garage and a library, and that's all. That's all we had to do. We didn't have guns or anything, so I like that one in it. I like the way it turned out.
I'm very fond of a scene that's not in the film, which is Smiley taking a swim in the ponds, and there is an old queer guy turning up, flirting with him. And it was, we didn't find the correct place for it in the film, but it was such a sweet scene.
That was Bridget's scene, wasn't it? She wrote that.
Yeah, I love that.
I like that as well. Yeah.
It was like, oh, they're looking at us, old boy.
Old filth in the bushes.
Yeah, that's my favorite.